Hi, welcome back to CS 170. We're gonna just do a couple of quick little things for Excel before we get over to the topic for this week, which is tables and pivot tables. Excuse me. So here we are right here. You have these guys right here. Obviously, you have your exam coming up this week. If you have any questions, make sure you let me know. I'll try to help out as much as I can. There should be review questions coming out shortly, so you'll be able to look at that. I think I kind of emphasized this before. Make sure you just write down like code snippets. And really, it's all about the JavaScript, right? So I know there's like some of the HTML elements that came through for your assignments with the radio buttons, the text boxes, and whatnot. But really, it's really all about JavaScript for this exam too. So make sure you understand all the stuff that was on the learning objectives in terms of understanding JavaScript variables, functions, arrays, loops. I know for the assignments, I mentioned a number of times that we had a lot of problems with people understanding the difference between a string and a number. In some cases Boolean, just try to make sure you have those straight. And what happens if those things interact, if you do a concatenation of a string and a number, what will happen? And a string obviously will be a concatenation, and then a number would just be adding together, let's say. We had nested loops. We had tracing through the code, showing what their variables are in. We had variable scoping, stuff like that. But do give me a shout if you have a question on a particular thing, topic, and we can go through it. Obviously, the TA lab hours are in effect. You can go to any of the TA lab hours. Okay. So this video is not going to cover the pivot tables and whatnot. I'm just going to cover a couple quick things before we get to that. Let me get back to here. Where am I? Here. So there's a couple of quick things that we'll go through here. So we've gone through relative and absolute cell references for Excels. We'll do naming cell ranges. You have the arithmetic operators. Remember, like the whole PEMDAS rule, right? So parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, so on and so forth, the ordering of that. If you remember, this caret sign is like your exponent, okay? I think we did all of these, but I'm just going to do a couple of these really quickly. You have the if statement, you have the if error, we have the VLOOKUP that we did from last week. I'm going to do a couple of these. I did the PMT last week, but I'll do this part also here. Subtotals and or not, right? And this is almost analogous to and or not when you look at the JavaScript too, so it kind of helps you if you know that too. Charts, we did charts last week. We did some conditional formatting. I'm going to just cover a little bit with the scenario analysis, and then I'll cut a couple of videos later that go over pivot tables and Excel tables. Okay, so let's get on with it. Okay, so you remember this from last week. We had the rate. I just kind of formatted it to be a percentage, but it's really 0.05 for a year. You have the periods, so it's going to be for 3 years or 36 months, and then we're borrowing $10,000. Okay, so here for the payment, you remember this. This is the PMT. I'm just going to go in here quickly so you can see what goes into it is the rate, the number of periods, the PV. You remember the FV is optional. It's really like if you have some leftover amount, let's say you want to pay back $8,000 and for some reason you want to have $2,000 left over. Doesn't really happen that often. Most of the time we just go to zero. You're going to pay back the full $10,000, let's say. So I'm going to close it up, and basically you have about $300 a payment. Okay. Oh, one thing I should remember, these are units here. So when I do this rate, it's for the whole year, right? But yet the periods is in terms of months. So you need to make sure you divide the rate by 12 so that you're talking about the same thing. So your rate is per month because you're doing periods as a month, right? So that's why you have to divide by 12 here, right? Now, here you have this IPMT, and then here you have the PPMT. And the only reason why I flipped it like this is just like I was typing this quickly. So for the interest, IPMT, I'm going to go here. Really, it's the same thing, except you have this period here, and I'll kind of go into that in a second. You have the rate, which is divided by 12, the number of periods, which is the same thing, 36 months, and the PV, 10,000, which is the same thing. And then same thing with the FV at the end. Okay, so I'm going to close this up. That's $29.59 per month. No, $29.59 for the first month. That's here. Actually, I made a mistake here. That's the first month. Okay, and let me set this back to 1 here. I was messing around with this before. Okay, so 1 here, this second argument, 1, that's the first period of all the payments you're going to pay back. You're going to pay back 36 months, right? So this is for the interest, and then it's the same thing for the principal. Okay, and you know, if for a sanity check, I just took this and this, added together, and you get $299.71, which makes exact sense, right? So you pay each month, you pay a payment, and part of that payment is an interest, part of it is for principal. Now let me change this to 12. Oops, what did I change there? I did change that to 12, didn't I? Thought I did. I only changed it to 2. Okay, and I'm going to change this to 12. Okay, but you can see the payment is still the same, right? So I'm paying in the 12th month here, and it still totals to $299.71. But what you see is the interest is going down and the principal is going up. And if any of you have another loan, you'll probably see the same phenomenon where the first payment, you're going to have a higher amount of that payment going towards interest versus principal. And then when you go all the way near the end of the loan, like the last payment, let's say, you know, much of it is going to be the principal, and just a small amount will be the interest. In fact, let's go all the way to the end here. Let's go to 36 here. So let's go to 36, and let's go to 36. So you can see on the very last payment, right, the interest is only like $1.24, and then the rest of it is pretty much the principal, right, $298.47, right? So that's why you have that little period as your second argument there, because the interest and the principal are not constant throughout the whole period of this loan, even though the payment is $299.71. Okay, here's mod. All right, you remember mod. Remember for JavaScript, you're going to do a percentage sign to do a mod. Or even when you write it on paper, I guess, you use a percentage sign for mod. Here, it's an Excel function, right? So mod 5.3, right? And if I do this quickly, you see the number in the divisor, right? So of course, when you do 5.3, you have a remainder of 2, right? 5 divided by 3, you get 1 and a remainder of 2. That's why you have a mod 2. So the power is the same thing. So this is really saying 2 cubed, right? 2 to exponent 3. All right, if I'm going to change this, see the number of the power. Let me change this to 4, and you get 16. Okay. Now that brings me up to the other part that I want to cover for this quick lecture is talking about scenarios. So we're here in data, right? So you look at data, and then you go all the way over here under what if analysis, right? There's a number of other things to play around with on the data side here, but this is what we care about for this class. So one is goal seek, right? This is where I set a target. Essentially, I'm solving for a variable, right? So I'm here, and let's say I want this guy here, okay? So I want this. Let's say I want to bump up my revenue. Actually, before I do this, let me explain this formula for a second. So I'm selling something, All right, I'm selling 500 units of something at $25 a piece with a discount of 10%. And that gives me a total revenue of this. So what is this formula? It's basically how many units I have and the price that I'm selling it at and the discount, right? So that's 1 minus B61, which is essentially 90%, right? So one way to say I'm taking 10% of something is to multiply it by 90%, okay? So that's why it's basically this formula to come up with your revenue, okay? Now that we have this formula defined, let's come back to here, goal seek. So I want to raise $20,000 in revenue now. 1, 2, 3. And what do I want to change? I want to say how many units do I want to change or sell to get to that. So let's see what that is. And you see Excel, it kind of does its thing. And basically I have to sell 889 units to get to that $20,000 revenue. Okay. Let me play around with that again. I do goal seek. I'm going to make this 30,000. 1, 2, 3. And I don't know what the heck. For the hell of it, let me just change the price. So let's say I want to change the price. How much do I have to sell it for? So now I have to sell it for like 37 bucks and 50 cents. Okay. If I want to get to $30,000, let's say. Okay. So the way I look at this is basically solving for a variable in your equation, right? So that's what this goal seek would do. Okay. Let me set this back. And this was 25 bucks. The other thing that we want to cover for this class is this idea of the scenario manager. And so what I've done, I've already set this up here, but I can also add more to it. So I set up scenarios, I call them names. I call them Rev 1, 2, and 3. And what does that mean? So basically, I'm going to be changing this cell, B59. Okay? And I change it to 600. And likewise, for 2, I'm changing B59 to 700. And let's see, this one, I change it to 800. So basically, I step in terms of units, I go 600, 700, 800. Right? So those are my scenarios, right? You can see over here, I've got 500 here. Okay? And let's do the summary here. And basically, this result cell is the 62 here, right? So I want to see when I change all of the units, 500, 600, 700, 800, what does my revenue become? Okay, so let's see. And so it generates, Excel basically generates this little thing here, right? So this is your changing cell. This is your result cell, right? So my revenue, right? So my units and then my revenue, right? And then it kind of steps it through each one, 500, 600, 700, 800. And then this is your revenue at each step of the way. So that's what the scenario manager does. And you can imagine, you can create a whole bunch of different scenarios with the variables and what you're going to check. In this case, I want to check what my revenue is going to look like when I play around with how many units I can sell. Okay, and you can imagine you can do this. You can create like a nice little graph or whatever, stuff like that. So that's really what the scenario thing does. So hopefully that's clear. Let me know if there's any questions on this. I'll be cutting some videos for pivot tables and Excel tables shortly. Okay, thank you.